you close up and put your top on your tube, you need to do some reinforcing on the inside. So you need to roll out some little coils to reinforce where your slabs met each other. So you need to take little coils on the very inside, on the inside edge of your pot, and we'll do a close-up shot of that so you can see. And you're going to lay coils and reinforce where your base attached to the height of your cylinder. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to reinforce the bottom circumference of the round slab that you just attached to your tube. The biggest thing is you need to roll out a coil, but your coil needs to be really skinny. You don't need a super thick coil. And then you're going to place it down in the bottom of your cylinder, and you're just going to push it into that seam. And I'm going to start at the front part, and I'm going to really take my wood tool, support on the outside with your hand, but I'm going to use the wood tool to blend in that coil. It's a little awkward to get in there, but you really need to make sure that coil is completely blended. If you use a really thick coil, what's going to happen is it's going to create an air pocket, and a lot of students have the air pockets in there and then they end up blowing up. Alright, so I just finished putting the coil on the bottom part, and you'll see some little snippets of photos of what it actually looks like. It's kind of hard to see with my hand in there, but we took some photos and we'll point out where the coil gets pushed in. The next thing is you need to roll out another small coil, but then I flatten it down so it's flat, and you need to go ahead and put a reinforcing coil in on the seam where you attach the two vertical slab pieces. So right through here, you need to go ahead and put this small tiny coil and blend it in smooth. What that does is reinforce that joint where we put the slab around and wrapped it. If you don't reinforce that, it's going to want to split apart. And most of the times you'll get this weird funky crack that just rides up on the outside or even on the inside of your piece, and you don't want that. You'll lose points. So I'm going to go ahead and just place this inside. I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up, and I'm just pressing it in with the wood tool, and we'll take a picture and show you a diagram of what it looks like when it's done. Alrighty, so we've reinforced the inside, and now we're ready to put the top on. But there's a few things that you need to understand about the top. You just can't take the slab off the table and stick it up here. What's going to happen is it's going to sag. So what we're going to do is actually your top was what we put on yesterday, which was the bottom piece yesterday. But now it's miraculously going to become your top, and you're going to take your cylinder and set it on top of your now bottom piece. So what we need to do first is, before we attach them, is score and slip them. So I'm going to go ahead and score and slip real quick, and then we'll attach just like you attached the bottom piece yesterday, which is now your top. Okay, I'm all slipped and scored. Now I'm just going to very carefully flip my cylinder, because now my cylinder is a little bit dry, so it's going to be a little bit more stable to attach it this way. So I'm just going to gently add a little pressure, make sure I'm on my slab. And I'm going to use my wood tool like I did before, and I'm just going to pull up the base slab to the edge of the cylinder. Okay, I finished attaching this base here on the bottom. You need to keep track of which one is the bottom that you put on last, because you're going to need to reinforce this one, and you don't want this slab that you put on tonight sitting in this direction. Because what's going to happen is gravity is going to pull that slab, because it's very soft. It's going to cause it to U and make a divot, and that will make a very ugly top. So we want this piece here that we just attached to stay on your bottom. The piece that's on the top now has been sitting for a couple days as your bottom, so now it's supported. It's not going to sag on you. And you're ready to now cut your top off so we can make the lid. Alright, so we're ready to go ahead and cut your top off. The biggest thing you want to think about is, one, you need to go down about 1 inch from the top at least to 1.5 inches, no more. So I'm going to mark a little dot here. That's how far down I will start my cuts. When you're designing some sort of rim to open your top off, you don't want to cut just a flat circle. What's going to happen is this little slide right off. You have to give it some sort of grooves or ramps for it to actually attach. But you can't put anything like undercuts or weird waves that would cause it to lock in. You can't make like a special key mechanism so that the lid actually locks in place. It won't work. You want to keep it kind of simple. You want to use the KISS method, okay? So I'm just going to do some brief waves, and I'm going to hold my piece and remember that it's needs to be 1 inch. And I'm just using the needle tool to draw them on. I'm not cutting it out with the needle tool. This just helps me make sure it's placed correctly, so then when they meet up, it actually meets together. And I'm just drawing a very basic wavy line. And sometimes something just as simple as this kind of line will be perfect when cutting out, because each one is slightly different and they'll fit. So it is kind of like a key, but there are no weird funky curves. So let me draw something that you don't want on here. So let me erase my line a little bit. You don't want something like this. So if you do a zigzag straight pattern, you can't have this weird curve come up here. What that causes is something called an undercut. Right here is the undercut. You can't pull it directly straight off. You have to kind of turn and move it, and if you have a ton of those, it's not going to work. Your piece is going to crack and break. So it's very imperative that you keep it simple and you don't put anything undercut wise on there. So I'm just going to add a little wave, fix this, so it's back nice and smooth. You can use like the triangle zigzags, but they get a little messy and you can't make them small. They need to stay wide. You can't have a whole bunch of little zigzaggy lines. They need to be wider triangles a piece apart. Sorry. So I'm going to go ahead and use my knife tool and cut out very carefully my cylinder lid. So I'm just going to follow the lines. What I recommend is go about halfway in and go all the way around with the knife tool, and then repeat, but press a little bit further in and follow your lines and cut your lid off. What this will do is cut your lid off a little more precise. It won't cause things, because some of your cylinders might still be a little damp when you're pulling them off. So if they might be a little more plastic than they are leather hard, they sometimes can warp or stick. This will just help them separate more cleanly. So now I'm ready to do my second pass, and I'm going to go all the way through. And then I'm going to gently separate it so I don't rip anything. Now you're a little rough with your design and your texture. I kind of cut a little spot a little too much. So what you're going to need to do is smooth out your edges. So I'll take a damp sponge and my finger and just go around all of my curves that I've just now cut in here and clean them up and smooth them out. I'll do the same thing with the lid. But don't set your lid back onto your piece unless you've put some paper towel in between, otherwise your lid will stick. Because right now you're adding water to it, so it's making it more plastic. And if you try to put your lid on there, your lid's going to stick, and then you're going to have to recut it, or you risk ripping your lid off. So I'm just going to go ahead and clean these edges off. And I'm just rounding them too. You don't want them sharp. You want to keep your edges relatively smooth and rounded on the edges. Remember, you don't want anything sharp because it'll chip. And then it'll be sharp when you glaze it. You want these nice and smooth. Okay, so I've rounded out the edges of my cylinder and the lid, and I'm ready to go ahead and put it back on. But notice I put some newspaper on two sides. My piece is a little sticky because it's still a little on the plastic side. But even as yours dries, you want to leave some newspaper so you can take your lid off. Because watch, even now it slightly sticks where there isn't newspaper. But this gives me a little bit of a paper barrier so I can separate my lid without breaking it. But before I store it away and put it away for the afternoon, I need to go ahead and reinforce that bottom slab that we put in on the cylinder for the bottom piece. Just like we did for the lid, you're going to roll out a skinny coil, so you don't need a lot of clay. And you're just going to roll out a really, again, skinny coil. I can't emphasize the importance that skinny coils work better than the fat ones. The fat ones trap air and cause problems, so you want to make sure it's skinny. You're just going to place it down in the cylinder, and then you're going to use the wood tool and blend it in, just like we did for the other piece. Back end of the knife tool to blend, and I'm even going to probably reinforce with little pieces of clay, because I don't want to take away from my shape of my anchor. So I'm just going to go ahead and push little coils of clay underneath so it blends my whole anchor in, but it doesn't change the shape of my anchor. And I'm going to go all the way around the whole piece with little coils and reinforcing and blending everything in. Okay, so I have my anchor attached. I'm just now going to go back and smooth everything out so it's nice and neat. I don't want any nail marks or leftover score marks. So I'm just using a sponge. You can use a rib tool as well, and just clean everything up. Then what you're going to do is, when you're all done with your handle, you're ready to start working on the sketch handout that Mr. Hitter and I have for you to design what you're going to put onto your cylinder. But here's my finished handle. You will be able to pick up your handle and actually remove it. Just my cylinder is a little stuck, but you should be able to hold it by your piece, okay?